or a hologram on deck 9, who knows what. I apparated. So, we've talked. You've read book 1. Has everybody read book 1 here? Because I don't want to do any spoilers. And how many of you have read book 2? Book 3? Book 4? Oh, you're book 5.
Yeah, I need it.
Yeah.
Really bad.
Gotcha. All right. I'm not going to give spoilers for these guys, but you'll kind of get the gist of what I'm talking about. All right. So this series starts, as you know, in May of 1854, and it begins on the flanks of the Red Mountains, which is now the Uncompahgre of Colorado, at that time the southwesternmost corner of the Kansas Territories. A lot of people don't know that the Kansas Territories was a vast expanse of land. Parts of Wyoming, parts of Utah, Colorado, parts of New Mexico, Nebraska. I mean, unbelievable. And down the road, this is kind of a funny little deal for you, but Kansas decided they didn't want all that stuff. So Kansas okayed the territories splitting off from the Kansas Territory. And I'm sure they're kind of kicking themselves right now. But anyway, that's what happened. So, first of all, I'll tell you what motivated me to write this. Because, number one, I'm a history addict. You know, history is the touchstone of the past. The touchstone of the past is the guidepost to the future. And it's one of the reasons the touchstone is under attack right now. But that's one of the things that motivated me to write these. When I was 9 years old, I decided I would write books. And I grew up in a ranch northwest of Fort Collins, Colorado. It was 7,000 people and 2 traffic lights. You know, it was nothing. Up in Risk Canyon. And my folks, you know, were people of the land. They had other businesses too, but people of the land. And they decided that for my sister's 3rd birthday, I think it was the excuse, we were going to fly to St. John, the Virgin Islands, which had just opened as a national park. And it was still tents only, you know, primitive, the way they like it. I had never been on a plane before, so I went in to ask my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Darling, I can see her to this day, curly blonde hair and plump red cheeks and the whole 9 yards, to ask if I could take a week off. And she said, you can, but there's a condition. She reached into her desk, I can see it right now, and she brought out this brown tablet. I'm sure you've seen them. They're about yay big, light brown, you open it up, white paper with the wide blue lines, okay? She goes, the condition is you have to write in this tablet every day about what happened that day. And then when you come back, you have to read it to the class. We go, oh, yeah, I got it. Yeah. Going down to the Virgin Islands, I'm going on a plane, and I got to write. I mean, what is this? This is worse than school. And then I got to come back and read it to everybody? Oh. Anyway, coming down into St. John, there were these puffy clouds, puffy little cumulus clouds, almost like cupcakes, down below the plane, and the sun was hitting those clouds and throwing round, dark shadows over this kind of gray, mauve, textured seascape. I mean, it was breathtaking. And it actually, I started to write. And I also drew I still have the book. I drew some pictures, terrible artist. You know, my stick figures are like the Egyptian hieroglyphics. So the pictures weren't too good, but I guess the writing was okay. And I wrote every day. I mean, I really liked it. So we get back, and the first day goes by, zilch. Second day goes by, silence. Third day, and I'm going, by now I was going, man, she forgot, I'm going to get out of this, right? Third day comes by, everybody had a sack lunch. There were like 8 kids in the class, you know, rural school. And she goes, well, I think, Reid, it's time for you to read us your first day in your diary. I'm going, oh, man, nobody wants to hear about my vacation. And I stood up in front of the class, and everybody's munching on their sandwiches or apples or whatever they had. And I read that page and a half or whatever it was of those wide blue lines. And I looked up, and everybody had stopped eating. I mean, they were just looking at me. And so I realized at that moment that I could tell a story and people would listen. So that was the moment I decided to write books. I was 9. Now, flash forward 40 plus years, I finally planted the toe of my boot up my butt and got going on it. And I was motivated by, this first book edition came out 2013, the very end of 2013. That was when this incessant and insistent and insidious attack on our history began. Okay, history is the touchstone of the past. The touchstone of the past is the guidepost to the future, and that's why the touchstone is under attack, obviously. So I figured if I could write a novel about America, particularly set in the West, which was the real melting pot, not the coast, and talk about how that tapestry evolved. And I could reach, a couple 100,000 people. That would be like a partial antidote to this lunacy. Well, millions of copies later, we're making a dent. And as you probably know, since you've all read book 1, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Since you've read book 1, I mean, this is really the story of us, right? Men and women of uncommon cultures, differing origins, competing ambitions, and how they weave into the American cloth in the West over the 5 generations. This story is really the story of the weave of that American cloth. I mean, that's really what it is. I've broken a lot of rules in literature. You're only supposed to have 1, maybe 2 protagonists and 1, maybe 2 antagonists. And as you know, there is a host of characters, and those of you who have not read book 2 are going to be meeting a whole passel more. You're going to meet in book 2 the Sioux, Walks with Moon, and Eagle Talon, and Blackfeather the Renegade. Yeah, you're not going to like him very much in the beginning. And the elderly black couple, Lucy and Israel, kind of setting their life sails for the winds of freedom from the the Indian territories, now Oklahoma. And then in book 3, you'll meet the Ute, Ouray, Black Mare, Chipita, and Felipe Reyes, who's quite the character. A aristocratic French Mexican who loses his ranchero to the gringos in the Texas War. He's not a happy clam. This is a bitter guy, and he's fast with a gun. And he's chased north by the Texas Rangers. And then in book 4, although you really don't meet new characters, there are certain secondary characters that are starting to get more into the fray, if you will, portending, in some cases, disaster. And in book 5, which will be coming out in a few months, there you go. In book 5, which will be coming out in a few months, you'll meet several more characters. A young Scotsman who comes to Galveston, to be a fisherman with his brother, but joins the Confederacy. And in book 6, you'll meet Wang Fu, young man from China who's drugged in Shanghai and awakens to find himself laying track coming east from the Pacific. And that will really be the basis. I mean, there'll be other characters in and out over the course of the tale, but that will be the basis, the 11 families that you're following, those that survive. And that is the story. There'll be 22 books in the series. The last book will be in 2029. It'll be the 5th generation of the characters that you're meeting now who survive. And it'll be set in the real time of the contemporary West. So, I mean, and it's set right here, actually. It's set basically from Lusk up to what is now Buffalo, and then over to Shirley Basin. So, kind of neat. Book 9, by the way, is north to Wyoming. And a lot of the action kind of moves north from Colorado, what is now Colorado, at that time the Kansas territories. But, you know, successive generations begin to spread out, and you'll see over time characters in Montana, what is now Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Idaho, Utah. In fact, there's a family that you'll meet in book 2. I'm not going to say much about it, but you'll notice over the course of the books they become more and more prevalent, and they settle on that side of the Rockies. So it's a big story. It's a big story, and it's our story, right? It's exactly our story. One of the things I do when I write, and you've probably noticed it now that you've read book 1, and some of you, by the way, have you read just book 1?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Well, you can sit up here, you know, I won't bite.
I didn't want to interrupt your...
No, you're not interrupting. No, come on up,
Sorry.
come on up, come on up. Thanks for coming. So, you notice that in the beginnings of every chapter, I begin with a setting. I mean, there's almost no exception to that rule. And I spent some time on it. And a lot of people say, you know, why do you do that? And number 2, what inspires you to, you know, write these chapters the way you do, or write these series of chapters the way you do? That setting, I know this sounds crazy, but it's true. That setting, once I've written it, that's like a portal. And I step through that portal, I'm on the stage, and the character's telling the story. At that point, I'm just really a scribe. So that's why I write it, but also because you've probably noticed, even in book 1, and more so in the upcoming books, that the land is kind of a character. You know, I mean, the land is the character, the land is the personality, it's the energy that binds all these various people. So that is why I write. And I'll say one other thing too. I've always been fascinated by the fact that America alone amongst nations is a tapestry. Every other country on the planet, think about it, is a mosaic. It's a really big difference, even though there are many doing their best to try and tear that apart right now, rend the fabric. But the creation of that tapestry, the mix of all these men and women, they really, they shared nothing, right? They had neither culture nor country in common. In fact, in book 1, as you know, they didn't even know each other. They didn't know each other existed, okay? Until kind of the hands of fate and the evolution of history brought them together. And I find that fascinating. That's called, by the way, a style called converging threads. Almost nobody writes it anymore. It's an old style. The last, I think, great converging threads writer was Leon Uris. Any of you read Leon Uris? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Exodus, Mile 18. I mean, great author. And it's very difficult to write because everything has to be seamless. You know, you can't just, like, you know, trip over somebody in the street and suddenly you're walking down the street with them and they're your sidekick, right? I mean, it has to all move together. And I love that style. And you might notice, I'll give you a couple little hints here, you know, but for the rest of you who will be reading the rest of the books, I do a lot of foreshadowing, and I do it way in advance. For instance, when Reuben and Johann go to the mercantile, and Johann chooses a saber, and the pearl-handled pistol chooses Reuben. All I will tell you is you will see, right? I mean, that is some big foreshadow, but there's a lot. If you remember the dialogue between Jim Bridger and Zeb in Cherry Creek, they were talking about their buddy Pierre, who got killed by the Pawnee. Okay, and Trapper Labanc discovered him on the way to the Laramies. Okay. It just so happens that on our upper ranch is Trapper Labanc's homestead. So, Book 9, North to Wyoming, is set right there. Right in Commerce County. Which is kind of interesting. So that's foreshadowing 9 books in advance. So I do a lot of that. And you'll pick it up as you read kind of more and more of my style. Another thing I'll kind of clue you in on, which folks, after they read 3 or 4 books, they get it. But in the style of converging threads, there's what's called days of conversions, where on a particular day, you basically see what every character is doing. Even though they may not have ever met yet, and even though they may be separated by thousands of miles, and that's a day of convergence, and that's bringing you closer to that ultimate rendezvous, right? So that you know what everybody is doing at the same time, because you know they exist, and you know they're going to meet, right? Which is part of the suspense of the story. So let me ask you guys a couple of questions, and we'll just go round robin. Who was your favorite female character?
I don't think I have one.
Okay.
No, I like them all.
And you, ma'am?
I liked Sarah just because she's going to have to win through.
Yes.
So she's going to have to be a strong character. The others kind of have some stuff going for them, but she
Right.
doesn't. And she's going to have to be strong.
Okay, I don't remember character names, but
Oh, that's okay.
The gal
Redhead,
that,
brunette, blonde.
yeah, I don't remember even that, but so she is traveling on the train with the woman who has the money. I don't know. is that-
Oh, Inga.
Inga, yeah.
She's
Inga.
the blonde.
Yes.
Okay,
She's the one.
Inga Bjorn from the fjords of Norway.
that could be
Yes.
that could be it. Yeah, yeah. She's a scrapper.
Okay. And you, ma'am?
I liked them all.
You liked them all? Yeah.
I found it interesting to get acquainted with each individual.
Yeah, they all have great backstories, don't
I
they?
saw that little hint in a statement that the lady was having a little nausea.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
She's going to be having a hard time the rest of her life.
You know, I don't even know how to spell the word spoiler. And who was your favorite male character?
The Inga's
Johann.
Johann,
Johann.
yes.
Yes. He's a rogue.
Yes.
He's definitely
He's
a rogue.
my favorite. He's funny, he's smart. Yep.
And you didn't escape the female question.
I would say for the female, it was Sarah.
Okay.
Having the courage to leave her sister and go on the boat, and
Right.
you know, I think that traveling alone and all that stuff, even though
Right.
everybody told her that she shouldn't and everything. And for the male, I really like Reuben.
Hmm.
I feel like he's, he's got a, he's, what's the word for it? That he's not bragging about all of his money, and he's not flashy, and
Right.
he has his stuff together, but he's kind of hiding that back, or not hiding it necessarily, but he's just
Reserved.
yeah, and he's just not overly confident about who he is and what he knows and where he's going, and
Right.
so I like that about him.
Cool.
I like Jeb.
You
I
like
like
that?
Jeb. Yeah, I've got to see what happens to him. You see him at the very beginning, and then you see him linking up with Reuben. But now I want to see how he manages the rest of his life.
Did you like it when Reuben is talking to him there on 4th Street?
Yeah,
And he's rolling a cigarette?
yeah,
And Reuben says, you haven't come hungry. Drops the cigarette.
yeah, yep.
Yeah, and I would go with Reuben too, just because he's not, he's really kind of not that interesting. Like he's interesting, but like kind of boring. Like, he's the planner, he's the organizer, he's the one that's gonna do well for himself. But yeah.
The guy who stole the ticket and stuck on the boat.
Jacob.
Okay.
Oh,
Jacob. Jacob O'Shanahan from
Yeah,
Dublin.
he's a shyster, and I take offense that you have the Irishman being the bad guy. What? Come on.
Well, don't worry. There's plenty of bad guys of other ilks coming.
Okay. I hated to have my lineage.
But listen, Jacob,
in your book. But he too is a scrapper.
the bad characters that you'll be meeting through the course of the story. Although sometimes they're evil, they're amoral actions kind of overshadow everything that you're kind of thinking about them. There's other parts of them. Jacob is obviously totally immoral, but he's very cunning, right? I mean, he's a smart dude. He has it figured out, for good or for worse.
I'd throw him under the bus.
There you go. And who was your favorite male character?
Oh, it might have been one of the first or I don't know. I don't remember names very well. Very first person introduced, and I liked that.
That was Zeb, the
Zeb.
mountain man.
As you uncover the characteristics and what they are capable of doing, it's interesting to see how you're developing each person so we know more about them when the story comes together. I'm
Right.
looking forward to the second book to see what they did with themselves.
Terrific. And in the second book, you'll find that I treat the Indians. I'm not blood, but I'm the second adopted son of a Mohican chief married to a full-blood Lakota. So the Indian writing that you read is number one from their perspective. Okay, this is not a cowboy and Indian book. It's amazing. I go to book signings, Barnes and Noble or the State Fairs or Frontier Days or wherever they have me going, and people will walk up and they'll pick up the book and they'll put it down and go, oh, cowboys and Indians, it's not even close to cowboys and Indians. These books, in fact, are the only books of a Western genre to ever win any, never mind 3, best multicultural books of the year. So, it's a much bigger story. But you'll find that the Indians are treated exactly as it happened. A very dark stain on the pages of American history. And you'll see it. You'll see it as it unfolds. I don't want to tell you too much. You will meet an Apache family. And I'm not sure if it's going to be in book 6, which I'm working on, or if it's going to be in book 7, but they will come into the fray. And the 3 Indian families that you'll be following will be Apache, Ute, Mountain Ute, and Oglala Sioux. There's a really interesting little thing. I'll give you a little, you're going to read it, so I'll give you a little foreshadow here. The Ute's deadliest enemy, and vice versa, was the Sioux. I'll just leave it at that. So you have all sorts of little things unfolding. What other questions any questions you got?
I have a question.
Yes.
So you were telling me before everyone came, I was asking about the historical accuracy
Yes.
of the book. books, and we had talked about like fashion as one thing, and you
Yes.
had said there was a person on the staff of the
Yeah, they actually hired a contractor.
to actually
Yeah.
go through the clothing and to describe the clothing of the whole period that you're writing about.
Yes.
So that you would be accurate in that regard. So I know that you have some kind of a Native American background, but did they have a similar kind of person looking out for the accuracy?
My senior literary editor is full-blood Lakota.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The Indian parts of these books are accurate down to what direction the Braves circle the lodge fire when they leave the council. It's that accurate.
And any of the interactions that you have, battles or something, are they accurate as well? I don't know what you have in your book, so I don't know, but like, are there any historical events in your book that actually occurred?
Yes.
Okay, and those have been vetted and all that?
Yes. In fact, book 6, Blood of Glorietta Pass,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to tell you too much about it, but you know, it's called by some historians the Gettysburg of the West. It was not large armies, but I will give you just a little precursor because you'll see it unfolding. So the Confederates mustered an army in Texas. You know, all wars are economic. Okay, they're not. Military is an adjunct of economics. Never in history has a greater economic power lost a war to a lesser economic power. I mean, even in the case of Rome, their coinage had decreased to 1/100th silver. Kind of sounds like America right now. 1/100th silver by the time they were ransacked by the Huns. So it's pretty interesting. The only reason the Confederacy lost the war is their economy collapsed, their currency collapsed. No other reason. Otherwise, we'd all be whistling Dixie right now. They had better generals, they had more fighting spirit, they had better soldiers, but they didn't have them equipped. And the Confederates mustered an army in Texas. Nobody knew, the Union didn't have a clue, to march north to seize the gold fields of Pikes Peak and the Uncompahgre. And so they're marching north. In the meantime, the new governor of the Colorado territories mustered a militia in Denver. Okay, the name had just been changed to Denver from Denver City, and then from Montana City, Cherry Creek, etc. And those 1,500, literally candlestick makers, bread bakers, half of them didn't even know which end of the rifle a bullet came out. They marched south to reinforce Fort Union in the New Mexico territory. So neither army knew the other existed. So they met, literally, the forward columns got 200 yards past each other before they figured out what was going on, and all hell broke loose at Glorietta Pass. The only cavalry that they had were ranchers. There was only 20 Union officers left in the West at that time. They were all east. The only cavalry they had was the ranchers and scouts and a few friendly Indians that joined them as they were marching south. And I'm just going to let it dangle right there. But that whole, it's the first novel ever written on that battle, which I really think was the decisive battle of the Civil War. If the Confederates had taken the gold at Pikes Peak, probably they didn't even have to go the Uncompahgre. They could have based their currency. It would have been a whole different ballgame. Which is exactly why they were after it. Yeah. I mean, it's a really fascinating twist, right? There'll be other historical skirmishes and battles coming up, and various of the characters will be participating in them. but all those battles will be accurate to the nth degree. In fact, over the first 9 books, every quote-unquote battle, I mean, I've visited the site, I've walked the route of the troops. And you'll see that Fort Laramie plays prominently too as you get into the books. So you guys will recognize all that country down there. By the way, has everybody here been to Fort Laramie? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a magic place. Yeah.
So how do you have any time to do ranching?
Well, you know, fortunately I write like the wind.
Uh-huh.
Now, there's several million people who would tell you I'm slower than hell. Okay, one of them's right here. But when I write like the wind. For instance, book 2, which is 138,000 words, which is a big novel, I wrote in 62 days. But I have to have a block of time. That's key. Every author, and I don't know if you guys have met other authors, I'm sure you have, but every author has their own thing. We laugh about it all the time. I mean, I've laughed with Craig about it, and CJ about it, and Lucia St. Clair, and Max McCoy. Everybody has their own thing that gets them writing. For instance, Larry McMurtry, okay, he would write 200 words a day. That's it. But they were perfect. I mean, they were ready to go. CJ writes basically 6 to 9 every morning. He might write 2 words, he might write 2,000. At 9 o'clock, he's done. Okay. Lucia St. Clair, she has a little cabin on the Chesapeake Bay. She'll go there, have food brought into her, the whole 9 yards, and she doesn't leave until the book's done. Max McCoy, Indiana Jones, 18 great Western novels, won all sorts of, the guy's tremendous. And he wrote Spielberg's Into the West, the screenplay. His house in Kansas, which I've seen, he's the head of the creative writing department there, is the basement is 10 feet high and probably 80 feet long. And one wall, there's a desk that sits in front of that one wall. And when he does a book, he takes 3 months, or whatever it takes, and he cuts pictures out of magazines and this and that and the other, and he'll do his whole storyboard on the wall. And then he sits at the desk, writes the book. And the way I do it, believe it or not, the outline is only the chapters. It's 2 pages for each book. Once I have all the chapter names, and you might have noticed that every chapter, the name of that chapter will come up within the chapter. It all ties back. But once I have that chapter list, that's the outline for the book. That's all I do. And I'm kind of like that stereotypical demonic writer, picture with, the butt hanging out of my mouth unlit, the coffee bubbling over on the stove behind me, papers everywhere, but that's how I do it. And when I start, I never do less than 5 chapters at a time. I try and do 10 or 15 at a time. And sometimes, like with this book, literally I wrote half the book in about 30 days and then sat down and wrote half the book in 30 days. But that's my style. Everybody has a different one. It's pretty interesting.
So do you have to have some kind of a cheat sheet about each character because you have to maintain consistency about that character over time?
It has to be absolutely consistent.
Yes, so do you have like a description of what happens?
And actually starting in book 3, and I'm sure you found this helpful, did you? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Starting in book 3, there is a listing of all the characters, up front, primary, secondary, all their the whole 9 yards, okay? And that's kind of your refresher, because by book 3, you're dealing with 9 different characters and sub-characters, etc.
But how do you keep it straight?
In book 4, well, I wrote that. In book 4, and from every book here on, which you'll like, did you kind of like that 40, 50 pages at the front?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
So in book 4, this is, again, unusual style, okay? In fact, I had a huge argument with publishers over this. They thought it was just a terrible idea. I have had 1,000% rave reviews on this. It's a nonfiction format where literally it brings you up to speed on the book, the series. For the first time, you have the map of where everybody is moving, etc. And then you have a 29. Then you have all the characters again, and then you have a 29-page synopsis of the first 3 books. Do not read it. You will screw up a lot of stuff for yourself. Okay.
Don't go directly to
But that will be in every book from here on in, all the way to book 22. In fact, I would imagine by book 22 it'll be 100 pages up front
Yeah.
in the book, and then
Yeah.
400 pages of the novel.
Yep.
So that's how we kind of handle all these different characters and all their different traits and what's going on, etc. And what that saves you from doing is going back. I mean, a lot of people read these books 2-3 times, which is great, and they find something. They dig out nuggets every time, you know. But that saves you from doing that if you don't have to. I mean, literally, when you guys get to, well, you'll be kind of in sequence, but when you get to book 5, okay, or you get to any book that, you know, there's a couple month delay or whatever it is, when you read that 40 whatever pages up front, you're on page 1 of the new book and you're 100% up to speed. Yeah. By the way, if you guys want, I brought some books down, and I'm more than happy. The library is great, and I'm tickled to be, you know, the book of the year or whatever here. I brought some books down, and if you want to get some books to complete where you're going on this, or for friends or whatever, I'm just going to do them for $10 each, which is kind of a rocking deal, and I'll sign them for you. Totally up to you.
Do you happen to have book 5?
I don't have book 5. I will not have book 5 until late June, July-ish. And then book 6 will be about 6 to 8 weeks right behind it. I mean, it's gonna be boom boom
That's
on 5
exciting.
and 6. Yeah, I actually wrote the 2 of them. I mean, 5 is done. 5 is in process. And you folks have no idea how much goes into a book after it's written. I mean, writing a book, as much work as it is the easy part. It's all the crap after that. It's just unbelievable. And it's been accentuated for the last 3 years by all this nonsense, the COVID nonsense, and you know, the supply chain nonsense. Right now, there's a huge paper shortage. No, there's a huge paper shortage. I mean, for instance, Glenn Beck brought his new book out, I think 2 months ago. I mean, they could only do 5,000 copies at a time because of paper. So we pre-bought the paper, which is I kind of saw this coming. So we pre-bought the paper, but I can tell you by the pre-sales and the reservations, there's not going to be enough to do Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, all the outlets, and the publishers list. One of the things I would really, really, really urge you to do, number one, there's no accurate information. I don't care what you read on any.com, it is wrong. 100% of the time, 100% wrong, period. No exceptions to that rule. The only accurate information is the publisher's website and their newsletters, which are very few, 5 or 6 a year. Make sure you are subscribed to those newsletters. They're actually kind of fun. There's pictures and all sorts of stuff. And you don't get many of them, but that will tell you what's happening with the books. Additionally, on the publisher's website, which is threadswestseries.com, okay, threadswestseries.com, and it's on the back of book 1 right here. I'll borrow yours for just a sec. Right here, okay? Go to the website, subscribe for the newsletters, and reserve. It's free. Only publisher in the United States that does it this way. It's cool. Free. No obligation. You don't want to buy from them after you get notice that the books are out. You don't have to. You don't have to spend a dime to reserve it. But what that lets them do, particularly right now with this paper shortage, they're actually separating paper at the printers. This is the publisher's list, and this is what's left. The publisher's reservation list will have book 5 and book 6 anywhere from 30 to 60 days ahead of a Barnes & Noble bookshelf. I guarantee it. guaranteed. So it's very worthwhile to do. By the way, they've priced books 5 and 6 on the website. They're going to be about $20 everywhere. They're going to be 15 on the publisher's website. If you want to follow through on your reservation, you don't have to. Okay. Yeah. What other questions can I answer for you?
Well, so you talked about how your writing process, but obviously you have to be doing some research prior to sitting down to write.
I did
So-
3 years of research before I even started this. But the research continues. And what's really interesting, in fact, sometimes it annoys me, but my characters annoy me. Because, I'm on that stage, I've stepped through that portal, I'm on that stage, I'm the scribe, they're telling me the story, and then they take this weird twist, right? And it goes off somewhere, and I gotta go, I'm gonna have to research this now. So there's research that goes on with every book, okay? And obviously, as times evolve, you'll notice that the first 4 books really only span less than 4 years, okay? In fact, book 2, which is a monster book, it's Action Jackson, book 2. It basically goes from March 18th, 1855 to June 1855. It's 2 months. That whole book just covers 2 months. So you'll see that in the coming books, 5 and 6, etc., the span will start to lengthen. In some cases to 2, 3, 4 years. In some cases to 5 or 6 years as we get further down the road. Okay, but these first 4 books are the foundation of the whole series. So the detail was spent, the time is greatly compressed so that you can get into all these nuances, all these personality traits, all these reactions to various situations by each character so that you know them. One of Canada's largest reviewers, Alexander Brown, the name of the shop is Romantic Shorts. Reid Lance Rosenthal has outdone himself. Rosenthal's people just blew me away. They are as real, if not more so, as most of the people I've ever met. And that was the purpose of doing it this way. This is kind of the compression of the spring before it starts going with 5 and 6. Yeah.
So you've only wrote the first 4? Or
No,
5?
five is at the publisher,
Okay.
going through its torturous procedures. Yeah.
So the list of 22 books here
Yes.
is just the foreshadowing.
Yes, it was foreshadowing, exactly.
Got it.
Six is mostly written. I'm just kind of finishing up 6, and I probably have it finished here by mid-May, and then that'll be in the torturous production process. Okay, book 7 I've begun, which is kind of cool, but that will not be until first quarter of next year. So the schedule right now is July-ish on 5. Once 5 is out, everything kind of falls into place. 5 has been a bear over the last 3 years. It's been interesting. The primary printer is in Illinois, so they were shut down, right? They couldn't even go to work. And then our audio guy, his studio was in California. Really? Book 4 came out, and the audio was like 6 months after that, because he couldn't even get into the studio. All sorts of just nonsense. Don't even get me foaming at the mouth. And any other comments? And by the way, any criticisms or suggestions, I was telling this young lady before you guys came in, do not hesitate to drop me an email. I didn't like this, I thought this could be this, I found a punctuation error on page 312. Really, that's great. We love reader feedback. You're not hurting my feelings at all. We love it.
Is your email address on there, on the book?
It is not on the book. I'll tell you what you guys do. If all emails from readers get forwarded to me, if you go to the threadswestseries.com site and write them a letter, Threads West Media, It will come to my email.
Okay, good.
You'll get a reply from rrranch021, which is my email.
Got it.
Yep, it'll get to me, and then you'll have my personal email. But don't be bashful. We get 50 to 100 letters a week, at least, sometimes more. The great majority of saying, where the hell's book 5? Which is stressful flattery. I'll have you know. Yes.
I have to say that I have a love-hate relationship with the cliffhangers at the end of every freaking book.
To be continued. Those dastardly authors. Those dastardly authors. But you know, you have to pick a spot to end each novel, right? And so if you're going to pick a spot, you might as well do one
Yeah,
that tortures everyone.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
This one, the end of book 4 is torturing me. And now it's torturing me even more.
You know, I just don't understand why.
Nope, I'm not going to say it. I am not going to say why I am tortured, because then that will spoil everything for these guys.
That's right.
I'm
That's
not
right.
going to do it.
That's right. Well, ladies, I have to tell you that you'll just have to put up with that, because you're going to see it in every book. It's just the way it's going to be.
And you've written other books then? Is it?
Yes, I've written, this is a 3-book series. The next one will come out probably next summer. I'm really in no rush, particularly with what's happening in macroeconomics right now. But this is nonfiction. This was also a #1 national bestseller, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, blah, 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 blah. And won 6 national awards. Was named Best Real Estate Book of the Year by USA News & World Report a couple years ago. Can't tell you which year. And this is really about the balance of your heart and your wallet, your mind and your emotions when it comes to real estate. It applies to any real estate, anywhere, but it's particularly apropos to ranch and rural lands. And this is this first book is kind of acquisition. The second book is ownership management. The third book is disposition. And then there'll be a workbook with contract forms, etc., that goes along with that. I mean, it goes back to the same fascination with the land that I kind of demonstrate in a different way in the novels, right? And these are $10 too, if you guys want. And thanks so much for coming down.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you have all 3 of the books?
I have all 4. No, you talking about Land for Love and Money?
Yep.
No, just book 1.
Okay.
Yeah, book 2 is, like I said, next summer.
I see.
Book 2 is actually written other than the last chapter, but I've been focusing on the novels. And one thing, it's a really different thing writing the nonfiction from the fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed when I first wrote this one, in fact, it was at the same time I was writing book 3, that I'd go back and forth, and I'd kind of stumble a little bit each time I went to the different, it's just a different mindset. This is written anecdotally, so great stories. I mean, you will laugh your butts off at some of the stories, and they are absolutely true. But I use them as kind of teaching mechanisms. But it's not the same as writing fiction. So I keep that segregated, and that book is literally 1 chapter away from being done and off to the publisher. And I'm in the middle of 5 and 6, and I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, get pregnant since then.
Yes. Yes. Would anybody like some books?
I want that one.
You got it.
Yep.
I'm a library person myself, so.
Super.
I am
Great.
too.
Library rocks.
Yeah.
Particularly this
Not
library.
accumulating. Yes,
Yeah,
we have a wonderful.
She is
library.
terrific.
Yeah.
Debbie rocks it.
It is the hot spot of the community. I
Debbie
think.
rocks it. Debbie, are you set on books 2, 3, 4, etc.?
Am I what?
Do you have books 2, 3, 4?
We do.
A bunch of them on the shelf. Okay,
Yep, and I'm
cool.
gonna buy 1 more of each of those 3.
Okay, great.
I think I want to have my own copy of each of those 2. I read
Now, do you have the nonfiction?
2, 3, and
one?
4 in a week.
I think so.
You did?
Yes, I did.
Will
You know,
are
you're-
you getting it?
You're a great
Okay.
compliment,
I
and
read that.
you're a nightmare for Mark. You know that, right? We actually have guys at book signings, I'm not kidding, particularly if it's a multi-day book signing. Like, perfect example. So we're down at NFR in Las Vegas, and we have thousands and thousands of books go out then. And there were people coming back, and the same with Denver Stock Show. Literally, they would buy the 4 books, and I'm not kidding you, one guy, he bought them at probably 2 or 3 in the afternoon. He was back noon the next day saying, "Where's book 5?" And I said, "Well,
Wow.
you want to get done with the first 4?" He goes, "No, I'm done with the first 4. And you think about all the time that you spend putting these books together,
I
and
know. And we can rip through.
you suck them up in a day.
Especially in Vegas, I would say
Yeah, I
you
feel
got
like we're
better
on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
No, Cowboy Christmas down there is actually,
Yeah.
it rocks. That's a great show. It's
Okay.
terrific. You know, and they got the rodeo there and the whole nine.
Oh, yeah, well,
I mean, it's,
for
it's
sure.
really good. And I'll tell you,
But I just feel like people should be reading when they're you know, for somebody to crank out 4 books in
It might be
24
cheaper.
hours. Yeah, I'm sure
Right.
it is. A
it
lot.
might be less expensive.
Yeah,
Your Irish is coming through.
yeah.